accidents. Now let's hear from Metrolink CEO Art Leahy and Caltrans Director of Government and Community Affairs. Is it Seamus? Seamus. Pardon me, Seamus. My apologies. Seamus Murphy about positive train control, which is the discussion is that if there had been positive train control, that accident in the Northeast Corridor would not have happened. So obviously this is something I think when the Metrolink accident occurred several years ago in Moore Park, there was also a problem with that, as well as with the construction of the cars, which we have started to address. But the positive train control is an expensive proposition, and it would be helpful to hear more about how Metrolink is on track to be the first passenger carrier in the country to have this system on its entire, or to have this control on its entire system. And so, Art, let's hear from you first, and then go on to Seamus Murphy.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Art Leahy with Metrolink. I spent 14 years at Orange County in Los Angeles, but I've been with Metrolink for 3 weeks, so I pretty much have it all figured out.
Okay. Glad to hear that.
So, after the accident that you just referenced, Senator, Metrolink did begin to push in Washington and in the industry for positive train control. I was with Los Angeles. We supported Metrolink at that time and the trade association and elsewhere. I must say, to a great deal of resistance from folks from the Northeast. We supported Senator Feinstein's initiative back then about PTC, and I am pleased to say that in 2014 we became the first commuter rail agency in the nation to begin running PTC-equipped trains. We are currently doing revenue service demonstrations on the San Bernardino, Antelope Valley, and Ventura lines. We will submit our plan to the FRA in June, and we expect to be fully compliant and approved by the end of the year. I would note for you that this has been difficult. It's taken a great deal of money. We're appreciative of the state's role. We've received around $156 million from the state of California to get this done. We're very grateful for that, because obviously what's at stake here is lives. I would just know about this terrible accident in Philadelphia. Robert Zumwalt, the chair of the NTSB, has opined that with PTC, full PTC, that the accident could have been avoided. I know there'll be a full-on investigation as to causes and all that sort of stuff, but we believe in, we continue to push on this. There's been some effort across the country to delay PTC implementation. We do not support that. We intend to comply with the deadline of the end of the year. We believe that's important because of the obvious issue of human life at stake. If you'd like, I can comment now on crash energy management, get that out of the way.
All right.
Or I can wait, whatever you'd like.
Quickly, when you say there's some effort to try to delay the implementation, that's just a funding issue?
It certainly is partly a funding issue.
Is there a philosophical issue?
There's a great deal of money involved in the East Coast, and now some like BNSF are moving forward, but there's a great deal of money at stake, and there's a great deal of funding required to get it done. So it isn't just an easy thing of going to flip a switch. It requires quite an investment in systems and ongoing operating costs to get this done.
So there's folks who just don't want to pay for it. And
I'm sure that in many cases they would say they're not funded to pay for it.
Right.
So we just have to make it more of a priority. And before we go to the next item, Seamus, why don't you go ahead and talk a little further on this PTC?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about what's obviously a critical issue. Seamus Murphy, Government Affairs for Caltrain. We run commuter rail service between San Francisco and San Jose and continue south to Gilroy, but the portion of the corridor that we operate on that we also own is between San Francisco and San Jose. That's where our PTC project will be implemented. It's being implemented right now. You mentioned that Metrolink would be the first commuter rail system in the state to have this technology functional. We're right on their heels. We fully expect to meet the 2015 deadline as well. And I think that's a good sign that here in this room we might have the only 2 commuter rail agencies in the country that will actually meet that deadline. It's a signal that we recognize the critical nature of these improvements, and we share the comments that you made earlier, Senator Jackson, that this is something that needs to happen as soon as possible. There are some unique benefits that I wanted to focus on that, of course, will achieve all of the safety mandates that are specified by the federal legislation. There are some unique benefits that Caltrain will also achieve as a result of our project. Some of that has to do with our efforts to increase capacity on the system. We have a system that's seen ridership triple over the last 10 years. We have to address that issue by adding in service. Our peak hour limits are 5 trains per hour currently, and we can't add any more service unless we add tracks or change the type of service that we offer. And what we're looking at is converting to an electrified service that would allow us to add more trains to our peak hour, more frequency to our existing stations, and support more ridership and add capacity. PTC is needed in order to do that. Our system would allow us to run trains more closely together and therefore appreciate that capacity benefit. It's also a condition for the implementation of the type of electric trains that we hope to operate, trains that would give us more acceleration and deceleration advantages and allow us to add that capacity and that frequency. It's also needed to support construction of electrification in general. There's work windows that are created through positive train control that are a part of the federal safety mandate. We can't construct our electrification project on an operating railroad without those work windows being in place. So this technology facilitates all of those improvements that we've been working towards for a long time. And there's one last improvement and benefit that I wanted to focus on. We have 42 at-grade crossings on our system, and we certainly share Mr. Johnson's comments about grade separation. We've worked to separate a number of our crossings over the last several years, and we have a goal of being fully grade separated eventually. When we're adding train service and number of trains per hour to our system, there's obviously an impact at those at-grade crossings from a congestion standpoint, from a safety standpoint, and from a congestion standpoint, more trains means that those gates are down more often. The PTC system that we're implementing has an advantage that would decrease the gate downtime at those crossings. So 28 of our 42 grade crossings would see a reduction in gate downtime compared to our existing service as a result of this project. So those are ancillary benefits, but all secondary, I think, to the safety improvements that absolutely need to be done here. And just lastly, like some of the other projects that have been talked about here, this wouldn't be possible without state resources. Our project is only possible because of the high-speed rail Prop 1A connectivity funding that was made available to agencies around the state. We're using our full share to support this project, and we wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Happy to address any comments or questions.
Thank you very much. Could you tell us what the cost will be to you of putting this PTC program into full operation?
It's a $231 million project.
For how many miles of track?
50 miles.
And as I understood your testimony, by putting this project, the service into place, the PTC service, that it also helps you with the electrification process. It serves many functions in addition to safety.
Correct. Yeah, we can take our existing diesel service from 5 trains to 6 trains an hour. It's needed to support the electrification program, which will support even more frequency and capacity. And then eventually it's needed to support the blended system with high-speed rail, where we would operate 6 Caltrain trains in addition to 4 high-speed rail trains every hour in each direction.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next we have David Kutrosky talking about safety initiatives on board and at stations, specifically referencing your work with the Capitol Corridor.
Good afternoon again. Pleased to be before you. My name is David Kutrosky, Managing Director, Capitol Corridor. I think it goes without saying that, but needs to be stated, that the CCJPA's top priority is the safety of our passengers, our employees, and the communities that we serve. We recognize that the Capitol Corridor trains are a product used by the public, and if the public doesn't feel safe, they're not using our trains. It's plain and simple as that. So to that end, I'd like to present you with some safety initiatives that we are working on for the Capitol Corridor. The first initiative is what you've heard both from Mr. Leahy and Mr. Murphy, is positive train control. We do not own any of the right-of-way, but we do own the equipment, the train sets that are there through the state of California. We are installing the equipment that will allow PTC to be enabled on our trains, and we are just wrapping up and should be in final testing in the next 30 to 60 days. So when Caltrain does go live, we'll be able to be testing positive train control on their territory. Our next step would be to work with Union Pacific as they own the majority of our right-of-way, and be working with them on the installation of positive train control. The other onboard initiative that we have is called Onboard Information System, OBIS. OBIS is a project that we've joined with Caltrans and Amtrak to provide enhanced onboard passenger information such as train status, emergency and safety information, and other services that are provided with our trains. This information will be broadcast in a manner that meets all the ADA requirements, and we've included the ADA community in our discussions and in the involvement and development of this OBIS system. The current project schedule calls for 1.5 more years of design and testing in a laboratory environment, followed by 3 to 4 months of testing on a live train set, and then when acceptance testing is completed, it will take approximately 2 years to install all of this equipment on the 120 cars that are going to be in the Northern California intercity passenger fleet. That includes the San Joaquin trains and Capital Corridor train sets. So this is a great program for all the intercity passenger rail services in Northern California. The third and final safety initiative I'd like to present are the safety and access upgrades that the CCJPA is working with at the train stations. For the last 18 months, we've been working with Amtrak and the local station owners to install various upgrades such as improved lighting, improved fencing and signage to improve passenger safety and access at the station platforms. With the completion of these investments, we're now rolling into our next phase and working with Union Pacific, the right-of-way owner, and our station owners to limit passengers crossing mainline tracks used by freight and passenger trains at our stations. An inventory is currently underway and will identify how extensive and how expensive these improvements will be. We'll be making a presentation to the Capital Corridor Board. Some of these projects may include warning devices and crossing gates to prevent passengers from crossing tracks until a train comes into the platform and stops and is ready to board passengers. There may be other possible solutions that may require more extensive grade-separated access to platforms, such as the configurations you can see at Sacramento Valley Station or the San Jose Diridon stations. As you can see, we take safety very seriously, and we will continually work with our service partners and local station owners to ensure that the Capital Corridor service is a high-quality, safety-focused public transport service. Thank you.
Thank you. I wonder, folks, if you have taken a look at the Japanese system, just because it is extraordinarily safe, and in looking at what we need to do to create those kinds of capital improvements, do you have you looked at what they've done, and are the costs less or more than what you're talking about here? Are they the same? And then how do you plan to get the funding that you need for these programs? Anyone, have you looked at the Japanese system? Any comments on it? No? Nobody's looked at the system?
I have not done so personally, but it's a good idea. We should do that. We have purchased cars which are much safer, and I'll come to in a minute on it.
No one's looked at the Japanese system. I would like to suggest that you look at the Japanese system and other systems around the world that have proven to be extremely effective and safe, and that these are models that we should look to. I'm not trying to pitch their products. I just think they have, because rail is so integral to their whole way of life, that it would be helpful to find out how they've done it and see if they've been able to do it. The best practices could be less expensive than what we're looking at. Maybe they don't even apply, but until we know how the other folks are doing it and making it work, I think it behooves us to become a little bit better informed about what the other options are, or not, if they're not an option, but certainly be helpful to find that out. What do you estimate the costs for the various programs, and where are you going to get the funding?
Yeah. Right now we're doing the inventory, and what What I don't know is the cost, but working with Union Pacific, I think we're going to be phasing in improvements. So our goal, and I can come back to you and your staff and lay out what we're seeing as far as a phased implementation and the funding sources that will be required to finance these improvements.
Before we go to our next, when you say working with Union Pacific, what is the nature of that relationship? When you say we're working, are they providing some of these resources, or are you negotiating with them to use their track? I mean, what does that entail?
Sure. We have a very positive working relationship with Union Pacific. We have developed a task force specifically for this matter, but we also have other task force that we've been working with them. As you heard from our vice chair, we have a 93% on-time performance. It was 94%, but I'm trying to get it back up there. But it's a long-standing relationship. We do continue to work with them on service expansion. We need to be mindful of their service expansion plans as well. But I think through our cooperative nature over the last 15 years, I think we've been able to show the benefits of that. So.
Thank you. All right, and we're going to go back to Mr. Leahy, who is anxious to talk to us about crash energy management for new rail vehicles, and appreciate you doing so.
Thank you, Senator. Back in 2005, Metrolink had a serious accident in Glendale involving multiple fatalities. Shortly after that, the FRA, the FTA, and APTA formed a crash energy management working group involving the railroad industry, suppliers, and others. Based upon that work back in 2005, Metrolink became the first U.S. entity to begin to incorporate crash energy management requirements into our RFP for rail cars. We did so, made an award to Rotem, Hyundai Rotem, back in the late 2000s. We had another accident in Chatsworth in 2008. We don't know for sure what would have happened had we had crash energy management there, but perhaps it would have been less. Crash energy management, the Guardian fleet that Metrolink owns, includes the following features: collision absorption technology, high seat backs facing in one direction for passenger safety, bolted-in seat and cushions, energy-absorbent tables, piston-like pushback frames in the cars to manage the energy, and improved escape and rescue access. These cars were expensive. We spent a total of $263 million on 137 cars. Again, with state assistance, we appreciate that very much. Right now, about 80% of our fleet include these cars. And by the way, on all of Metrolink trains, there's a crash energy management car at the front and the rear end of the train, such that if there's an accident, we have some level of protection. So we're going to continue to work on PTC, on crash energy management. As everybody has mentioned, there's the issue of grade separations. That's exactly correct, a major issue. And we're going to continue to work on that as well, although there's hundreds of grade crossings in the Metrolink service area, so it's going to be an ongoing task. With that, Madam Chair, I'll conclude.